She came every morning at the same time, 6:43, like clockwork. You could set a watch to it. First, the flutter at the edge of the yard, that burst of red that lands like a lit match on a gray morning. And then, a second later, a smaller shape behind him, brown, quieter, less noticed by the world, her. They had been coming to this feeder for 4 years. He always landed first. She waited. He fed her sometimes, beak to beak, the way you only do something for someone you have chosen. 4 years. The same 2 birds. The same branch they perched on. The same order of arrival. The same small rituals of a life built together in a backyard in Ohio, or Pennsylvania, or Virginia, somewhere that looked ordinary from the outside. Then one morning, the red bird came alone. He landed on the feeder. He waited. She did not come. He waited longer. And in the silence that followed, in that simple, devastating absence, something shifted in the yard that a camera could record, but language has always struggled to hold. For most of human history, we told ourselves a story about animals and emotion. The story went like this: they do not feel the way we feel. They act on instinct, loss, grief, longing. These are human inventions, too complex for a creature with a brain the size of a walnut. When a bird's mate disappears, it moves on. It finds another. It is not capable of anything more. Scientists believed this for a long time. It was cleaner that way, easier to study, less uncomfortable. But then, researchers started doing something they had not quite done before. They started watching, not just counting birds or tracking populations or measuring wingspans. They started watching individual pairs, over years, through the full arc of a bond. They put up cameras. They logged behavior at feeders. They followed the survivors. And what they saw did not fit the old story. What they observed, in field notes, in behavioral logs, in the slow accumulation of hours watching individual birds, described something that the old model had no tidy category for. What they saw looked, in their own careful language, something like grief. Welcome to Still Wild. This channel is about the science hidden in your backyard, the stories happening just outside your window that most people walk right past. If this is your first time here, we are glad you found us. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming. Let us start with what we know. Northern cardinals, Cardinalis cardinalis, are one of the few songbird species in North America that form lasting pair bonds. Not seasonal ones, not ones of pure convenience, bonds that persist across years, across winters, across the full span of the bird's life. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology, one of the leading centers for North American bird research, has documented cardinal pair behavior across decades of field observation. Cardinal pairs are monogamous within breeding seasons, but the deeper pattern researchers notice is this: they tend to return to the same territories year after year with the same partner. Not every pair, but many, more than chance would predict. When spring arrives, the male begins to sing. He sings from high branches, from fence posts, from the tops of the tallest trees he can find. He is announcing himself. But more than that, he is calling for her specifically. The female has her own calls. They learn each other's voices. This is not a coincidence. Research into avian vocal recognition shows that mated pairs develop distinct call patterns they use only with each other, a kind of private language built over seasons. The male feeds the female during courtship, a behavior called mate feeding. He brings a seed to her beak. She tilts her head slightly and accepts it. It looks, to anyone who has ever watched it, like tenderness, and the science backs up the intuition. Mate feeding in cardinals reinforces the pair bond. It is not random. It is directed. It is chosen. The same feeder, the same branch, the same tree at the corner of your yard, year after year. This is not habit. Habit is what you do without thinking. This is what you do because you have built something with another creature, and you return to it the way you return to anything you have made your own. Now comes the part that is harder to talk about. When a cardinal loses its mate, the surviving bird does not simply reset. Researchers who study pair-bonded songbirds have noted a consistent pattern. The surviving bird behaves differently than it did before, and differently than an unbonded bird would. Not always, not in every case, but often enough that it shows up in the data. The first thing researchers note is searching behavior. The surviving bird returns, repeatedly, to the last locations it shared with its mate. The feeder, the nesting site, the branch they perched on together. Observers tracking individual birds have noted this. The survivor seems to check the old places, more than would make sense purely for foraging. The pattern does not match food seeking. It matches something else. The calling changes. Cardinals have a rich vocal repertoire, and mated pairs use specific calls to locate each other across distances. Contact calls, essentially. After a mate's death, some surviving cardinals continue producing these contact calls for days, sometimes weeks. They are calling into space that no longer answers. Ornithologists studying pair-bonded songbirds have pointed to this behavior as one of the more difficult to categorize. It does not fit neatly into any standard survival function. The body changes too. Research on pair-bonded birds more broadly, not cardinals alone, but species studied in more controlled settings, suggests that losing a long-term mate can produce measurable physiological stress. Elevated stress hormones, weight loss, reduced singing. A male cardinal who has lost his mate often goes quieter. The song that once poured out of him each morning, the long, looping whistle that ornithologists write as cheer, 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 pretty, 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 shortens, simplifies, sometimes stops. We should be careful about drawing straight lines from those studies to any individual bird at your feeder. Science is cautious for good reasons, but the pattern appears in enough observations, across enough species, that researchers no longer dismiss it easily. Something changes. Something real shifts. That much the data supports. Not every cardinal story ends in permanent solitude. Some surviving birds do find new mates, particularly younger birds. Birds who lost their partners early in what might have been a long bond. The drive to breed is powerful. Life has a forward motion that even grief cannot permanently arrest. This is true in cardinals. It is true in us, but there are cases, logged by backyard observers, birders, and naturalists, of cardinals that do not find new mates, that continue to hold their original territory, that return, season after season, to the same locations where their partner once was, where the feeder still hangs, where the branch still waits. One account, shared in a naturalist community and followed over 3 years, described a male cardinal who never took a new mate after his partner disappeared. He kept coming back to the same feeder. His song eventually returned, but he always sang from the same perch, the perch she used to answer from. Now, a single observer's account is not a controlled study, but it is also not nothing. It is the kind of observation that makes researchers ask the next question. We cannot know what is happening inside a bird's mind. The science is honest about that. We do not have access to cardinal inner experience. We cannot ask him what he is waiting for. But researchers in animal cognition, including work coming out of institutions like Cambridge and the broader field of comparative psychology, have increasingly argued that dismissing these behaviors as purely mechanical requires a kind of certainty we do not actually have. The honest position, they suggest, is not to claim birds grieve the way we grieve. It is simply to hold the question open, to say, we do not know exactly what this bird experiences, but we know what he does. Some birds return to empty feeders, and they sit there. And the simplest explanation, pure unfeeling instinct, does not sit quite right with what we observe. I want to speak to you directly for a moment. If you are watching this, there is a good chance you keep a bird feeder, or you used to keep one with someone, or someone you loved kept one, and when they were gone, you kept filling it, maybe without even knowing exactly why, just because it felt important not to let it go empty. There is a chance you have seen a cardinal at your window after a loss, a flash of red at the glass on a morning when everything felt wrong, and something happened in your chest that you could not fully name. Not quite comfort, not quite grief, something in between, something that felt, against all reason, like contact. I am not here to tell you what that meant. That is yours. But I will tell you this. The science we have just walked through describes a creature capable of behavioral attachment that persists beyond the presence of the other, a creature that returns to the places where love lived, a creature that calls out into silence, a creature that, in some documented cases, never fully redirects that attachment elsewhere. Nature does not always mirror us, but sometimes it does. And when it does, it tends to find us at the exact moment we need to be found. The cardinal at your feeder is not carrying a message from someone you lost. That is not what I am saying, and it would not be honest to say it. But a creature that returns, that calls out, that keeps showing up at the place where something mattered. That behavior is real. It is observed. It is worth taking seriously. Science and something beyond science. Both can be true at the same time. Come back to the beginning with me, the feeder in the morning, that hour just after first light when the yard is still, and the air has that particular quality. Cool, expectant, not quite committed to the day yet. The hour when, for 4 years, 2 birds arrive together. He comes now alone. He lands on the feeder. He takes a seed. He looks out at the yard from the branch they shared, the one at the corner of the garden, the one near the window where you sometimes stand with your coffee. He is not frozen in grief. He is alive. He is feeding. He will sing again this morning. He always does eventually. Cardinals are not defined by their loss. Neither are we, but he returns here. Every morning, he returns to where they were together. And there is something in that, in the simple, stubborn act of returning, that transcends the question of what birds are or are not capable of feeling. To return to the place where love was. To stand where the 2 of you stood. To keep showing up at the feeder even when the feeder is half the story it used to be. That is not nothing. That is maybe what loyalty actually looks like when you strip away all the words for it. Not the dramatic gesture, not the declaration, just the returning. The daily, ordinary, faithful act of going back to the place where something mattered. We do it too. We drive past the old house. We keep the coffee mug they used. We sit in their chair. We fill the feeder. And outside, on a branch at the edge of a yard that will never be entirely quiet again, a small red bird does the same thing we do. He returns. He waits. He sings. Have you ever had a moment with a bird that felt like more than coincidence? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and if this video meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it. Subscribe to Still Wild. There is always more happening in your yard than you think.